This is meeting number 7 of the Fort River School Building Committee. And this meeting is being recorded by Amherst Media. And I will call things to order. The first item on our agenda is to approve the previous minutes, but I'm not sure everyone had time to read them, so we will defer approving them until next time. Oh, and I should also note that our meeting minute taker is not here. She's going to be doing it from the recording, so speak as clearly as you can. Okay, moving on. The next item is public comments. Any public comment from the public that are here in attendance? Oop. I did send around a couple emails from folks. I can either, actually I'm not quite sure what the proper procedure is with emails, so that's probably why I brought them, but I can read them into the record, if that's the right way to do it, or we'll just kind of include them. But I would like to also talk about how we distribute or handle comments from the public and make sure they get addressed or what the right procedures are. I don't know necessarily the right procedures myself. I'm more used to kind of having public at a meeting, and then you're kind of addressing, you hear the comments and you address it however you address it as part of the public meeting.
So the only thing that I would say is that the folks that emailed us probably were unaware that they would be read publicly, so
Okay.
I don't know if that makes a difference in,
That's true.
in how we
Handle it.
handle them. Unless we, send something back and saying, when you send us emails, we will be reading them, which could get to be
Likely.
burdensome.
Yeah.
Burdensome, but also potentially frees people from making comments that they'd otherwise like to make.
Okay.
So it probably doesn't, from that perspective, you wouldn't want to say to people, only send us comments if you're prepared to have them read out loud at a meeting.
Yes. I mean, I think folks are trying to communicate with us. It's as much about what is the right way for us to then communicate back when we get an email. And so I don't need to read them in, or at least I don't think I need to, but I brought them in case we want to figure out how to address them.
But people do need to realize that everything they write to us is public record.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe we should put a note on the email on the website
Yes.
saying all the emails are public record. If you want not to be read in public, put a note on the email.
Yeah. Fair.
I don't know if that's legal or not.
I would think that.
Okay.
I mean, they can certainly indicate in the email if they don't want to be read. It doesn't, from a legal perspective, it doesn't change our ability or the public's ability to discover what has
Yeah.
been sent to this email address. It would be a courtesy only.
Yeah, as a courtesy, but somebody if you're very interested can discover it, but not broadcast it. That's
If it can't be discussed at the meeting, we can't discuss it among ourselves,
then you can
what is
do-
the use of,
Right, communicating.
not to say that everything that's sent should be automatically read.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think I would differentiate between the question of whether we want to adopt a customary practice of reading all the emails out loud
Yeah.
versus the question, I mean, to my mind, it's definitional that if somebody sends an email to a public body, they certainly could be discussed in a public meeting, and someone should expect it. And ironically, the more salient, the more valuable the email is, the more likely it is to be discussed publicly. The less valuable it feels to be, or just sort of attaboy, or fix this thing, then the less likely it will be read. So I think to me, I don't think we should read them out loud unless there's a reason to. I don't think we need to tell people that because also it's a public record being sent in. Then the real question is, how do we want to respond to it? As you were saying, go back to how do we want to. I think everyone deserves a response.
Yes.
Some sort.
And what is the right way for that response to come? Does it come from the group? And an email one of us composes and sends it on behalf of the group, or is it all right for me as the chair or someone from one of the working groups to address it if it's related to the board?
So my experience in writing to the school committee is that you can get an individual response from an individual member
Yeah.
who can give their individual opinion. But if we're going to respond as a group, and it must be discussed, and that would need to get put onto an agenda and say, somebody would say to the chair, hey, I want this issue brought, put on the next agenda so we can discuss it as a group and attend to it.
I think that's true unless the answer has already been decided. So if somebody says, hey, I'm not sure if we're gonna, when's the RFQ going out, and the group's already discussed and decided when it's going out, then under that circumstance, the answer could just be directly given.
Or direct the person, direct the party to where that information might be found.
Right, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Which I like
Okay.
the way we sort of punted still the question of who's taking responsibility for this.
Exactly. No, I think I have at least a better understanding in my head, so when I see things, I'll have a better sense of who to direct it to, or how I might respond. So I think
Did they go to you?
I got them, I don't know if everyone got them.
Yeah, but-
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought so.
Yeah.
So how does the school committee deal with email correspondence?
It depends on the correspondence. I mean, some things that we get are in the normal course of things that we're dealing with on our agenda anyway. And so we don't necessarily respond to actually, first off, we don't really respond to people's comments. The philosophy behind that is we want to welcome everyone's comments equally. We don't want to get in a situation where people feel like we're arguing with them over their comments or reviews. And so we're really sort of receiving and taking that information into account in the work we're doing. If somebody asks a question, then if it's sort of, I hate to call it mechanical, but it's something we already know the answer and it's been addressed, then often Deb Westmoreland or Mike Morris might jump in, or I might do so, or in the case of the previous chair of the Amherst Committee, Phoebe Hazard might do so. And then obviously, as Maria mentioned, sometimes emails don't go to the group, they go to an individual member of the committee, and then they're, of course, free to respond themselves, but then they're not necessarily speaking for the committee. I mean, that's been the definitional things around it. If the chair is defined, as it is for the school committee, as being the official spokesperson for the committee, then that person is the spokesperson unless they delegate it to somebody else, which could be the case if there was a subcommittee formed to deal with an issue. You just kick it to whoever the leader is of the subcommittee. I don't know if that's helpful. Sounds like a bureaucracy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it sounds like we could just say that the chair is responsible for communication, but I don't know if that's,
Yeah, I don't know that, I mean, we haven't talked enough, I think, to have the chair necessarily act as the official spokesman. I think we'd want to talk about that before we do that. I'm comfortable with either role, but I think a lot of times that requires the chair to get the input, to have the answer to speak. And then, of course, that just kind of draws you back to the notion of, okay, it's important enough, it needs to go on the agenda, and then we as a group discuss it, and then if you have someone who's acting as a spokesperson, it's easier for that person to do that. Makes sense. Okay. Any more discussion about discussion or communication? We haven't had the public outreach item on the agenda, and we don't have it specifically tonight, but should we add that to the agenda for the upcoming meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the next thing I have is to review the air quality solicitation and presumably vote on that.
Okay, so only, as I sent an email to the committee on Friday, only one response was received from ATC Group Services for $15,760 exactly. They asked, and I informed them that they were the only bidder, and that we were meeting tonight to decide on the award of the contract. I also sent out and printed tonight a copy of the contract that I would anticipate sending them. It's the standard 2-page contract for the town. Vendor signs first, sends it back here. I believe Sean would probably sign as department head. Although I'm not 100% on that. comptroller signs, and we have a valid contract and can begin work. So that's where we stand. I assume that everyone is fine with proceeding with the HEC, but that's my part.
Yeah, so in the email that was sent to you, there were some questions that ATC had, I'm just quoting, however, some of the requested test new solicitation may not provide the most accurate data. For example, examination of particulate data is most accurate on spore trap filters instead of the specified polycarbonate filters. And the requested colony forming units per cubic meter there is most accurate from culturable plates instead of the specified polycarbonate filters. So they had, they wanted to do things slightly differently. Is that something that the contract that was sent out, that we'd be signing would allow them to do the method that they want? Or are we going to, where are we in the methodology?
So I saw those comments. First, I guess I'd like to know, do the people that know this thing agree with the comments? What was it true?
It's not a yes or no, but polycarbonate is a better measure for the long-term sampling rather than a fairly quick sampling. Spore traps become overwhelmed with debris, I suppose. So we disagree with their statements, and we would prefer to stick with the original contract as written.
So what is the difference between longer term and shorter term in terms of the desirability of this?
So the shorter term takes probably an adequate picture, which is why it's not a yes/no question answer. But it's a very brief sampling, 10 minutes, 10, 12
Okay.
minutes.
Because we're doing hours.
Right.
How many hours do we assume?
8.
8.
Jim, do you have any papers on this or anything that you could
Sure.
refer me to?
I would point you in the direction of the EPA sampling methods and World Health Organization documentation for sampling of environmental hazards.
Is it safe to assume both are fairly typical?
Both are fairly typical. No, help me understand. In what way?
Yeah, in other words, are both commonplace solicitations?
Spore traps and the polycarbonate? Yes. The spore traps are more commonly used. Currently, I think the polycarbonate is where the industry is heading.
So getting back to are they going to do what you recommend, or are they going to do what they recommend?
They will have to do what we, if we feel that what they're offering is an upgrade and they want to do it for no cost, we could accept that change. But I'm assuming they would, I would operate under the assumption they will do it to spec. And I'll include comments in my award to them that we appreciate their comments, but we have to go with what was outlined.
Okay.
Other comments, questions? Should we move to accept it?
The only thing I wanted to mention, I already sent an email about this, just a factual question of can it get done before April break, and you think that the company can do it for
The vendor indicated that they believe they can get this going in our time.
Sampling, the actual growth of the microbes and so forth will take a month.
Sure. But I want to get it in before we
Yes.
air out the place for a week in April.
The contract currently reads April 13th.
Do you have any other observations based on your review of the response that would be relevant for the committee to hear?
I find that ATC is a reputable company. I've worked with them for years. I have full confidence in their capabilities.
It's within the budget.
I'm very familiar with the company. I would agree with your comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I've worked with them in other projects.
Other comments, questions?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the proposal.
Second?
All in favor?
And I'll send this out tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you.
Should we just send it over? It's under a separate.
The next item on the agenda is committee membership. current status of open seats and how we're going to get back to the full complement of folks.
So, the school committee, so funny, we discussed this such a long time ago, but it wasn't on our last agenda. So I felt challenged that I knew the answer of what the school committee thought, and I couldn't share it and talk about it with you. The school committee, upon reflection, decided that given the amount of work that had gone into defining the categories for membership on this committee, they felt that, and also with great and deep respect intended to the members of the committee who were here, if you've heard anything about how we actually picked you wonderfully put forward your names, which is deeply appreciated, but the actual selection process involved a hat and names and a hat. And so the reality is the committee already had previously set a precedent that what it was concerned most about were the categories that were being filled of people who could participate and offer their wisdom to the committee and to the work, not necessarily wanting to oversee every last single appointment. So we voted, I think we voted, then we decided, I think we did unanimously decide to defer to the school building committee to make its own appointments in the categories that have been set by the committee. So Amanda, it's up to us.
Okay. So then, what would be helpful to me, and maybe for everyone else, is to be reminded of what the open positions are and what they were intended to fill. I know there's at least one teacher position, I believe, or is it teacher staff?
Staff.
Okay, staff position, not necessarily teacher. There's the seat that Claire had. I don't actually know what that was the title. I know she was a town employee.
Town finance.
Town finance.
And that's, and to be clear, that's actually appointed by the town manager.
Town manager, that
Yeah.
one. And
I will say that when the town manager sent the letter with my name, the town clerk rejected it. He said they needed to think this with me.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
How funny.
Tons of, very funny.
All right, it's not really funny, actually. It's more just interesting.
Complicated.
Not funny.
Okay.
And I believe there's a third.
So wait a minute. Are you, pardon me. So we made a decision that we were going to defer to the committee. Now you're telling me that the town clerk's saying, no, what actually has to happen is this committee, for example, might recommend up to the school committee an appointment, but then the school committee does in fact have to officially appoint them?
Well, the town clerk rejected it before the school committee had made that decision. So
Okay.
maybe with the information that the school committee has made that decision, they will be fine with it. I don't know.
It'd be awesome for us to look into next, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just to circle back, we still don't have you as a voting member.
That's correct. I have not been sworn in.
So what has to happen is for the school committee to notify the town clerk of their giving.
Intention.
It's
Delegation of
that it
authority,
is
yes.
our decision. So so who can do that?
I'm on the school committee, so
Awesome.
I will take the responsibility.
That would be
I will take the
great.
We
responsibility.
can, we don't vote, so we should vote on the other two open positions.
Yes. And does anyone recall what the third position was?
That was community member.
No,
No,
we
I
are
would-
the community members at large.
I'm parent at large.
You're a parent at large.
Yeah.
They were both,
PGO.
I thought we had 2 teachers/staff positions.
Yes.
That were open.
yes,
Okay,
I
so
thought those
two
were the
teachers
positions.
staff.
right,
Okay.
which is was Jean and Nicole.
Right.
Right,
Right.
right, exactly.
You were separate.
Yeah.
You were the school administrator.
So my question about that, and I could go back in the notes too, is like, is one supposed to be Fort River based and one supposed to be district based, or does it not matter?
Does not matter.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be nice for one of them certainly to be Fort River based.
Yeah.
Okay.
Having one applicant,
Yes.
Yes.
can we make it happen today?
Though the school committee has requested, I mean, look at it this way, whether the mechanics end up being that there needs to be some sort of administrative action on the part of the, I mean, my point is, and this Anthony goes back to this, we have an open question, right? Either the town clerk is gonna take the guidance from the school committee and say, okay, great, now I'll just take a letter from the Fort River Feasibility Committee of whoever's gonna be appointed, or they're not, in which case, this committee is still gonna have to officially send up recommendations to the school committee that are then essentially, ministerially approved and then sent off to the town clerk. That still would leave the job, at least for today, of seeing whether we wanna take our action right now.
I would say we can take the action and either it goes straight to the clerk or it goes with an intermediate step through the school committee.
Right, exactly. Because the school committee itself has already made its statement. It wants either this committee to directly appoint or to recommend to it if that's what we're forced to do essentially.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Let's do what we can do. So we have a nomination, or not, nomination is quite right, a volunteer. Who's sitting right over there, being very patient. Ben Harrington. Can we have someone move to nominate or whatever we're doing?
I move that.
I know I can't leave it
We,
like that.
that Ben Harrington be made a part of the Fort River School Building Committee.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So you can come over now.
No, because he cannot vote.
He cannot
He can
vote,
sit here.
but he
He
can sit
can sit
closer
here,
if
but
he
he cannot
wants.
vote until you get
We don't have
appointed
to
by the
ostrich
clerk.
So we gotta figure out the deal about what makes you official, but come on over.
You get to get sworn in.
Also, that way you can get on camera and feel awkward.
Yeah.
Assuming anyone feels awkward. It's hard
So all
to.
the material for today is
And before we move off this topic, is there a way we can better communicate with faculty and staff and encourage someone else to join us? I know some sort of communication went out, but can we repeat that process? I mean, it would be nice to have a full complement if we can.
There was a couple of emails that went out asking for volunteers. I'm happy to pitch it tomorrow at our faculty meeting and welcome if anybody wants to come by for 5 minutes to be a co-pitch person. It might be helpful to see a fresh face because I ask a lot of people every day.
What time is that?
We will start 2:45 is probably the best time to come.
I will check my calendar and try to come.
Great.
Could you have your colleagues at Wildwood and Crocker likewise pitch their staff?
Sure.
Because we apparently have to cast a wide net.
Is there more to talk about on this topic tonight? Okay. We will move on. And somewhat related to this is future meeting locations. We've been meeting here for a while. Our meetings' times have kind of moved around, but I thought it would be a good time to kind of talk about whether this is still a good time. I mean, a good place. The times will shift because we're trying to, get the most people at the most meetings. What I realized today after Diane emailed me is that after 5:30, the doors are or can be unlocked. So at least we don't have that issue to deal with if the meeting is here. But I'm not necessarily fixed to this position personally. If there's better places with easier access for the public, especially when we get to discussing designers and things like that, I think they're likely to have attendance. I'm open to thoughts.
This was brought up at a meeting a couple meetings back, and there were some suggestions made, and I thought someone said they were gonna look into them, but I don't remember who volunteered to do that, but we talked about the police department, and I can't remember
community
the other.
center, the community center is one of them.
Yeah.
And I also feel like the library was suggested.
Yeah, possibly, so.
The
Town
downtown.
hall, yeah, yeah.
Town hall is tough because town hall is on books on these days. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Who do I find out, who's in charge of basically the calendars at those locations? Or who in town hall would tell me about that?
Town hall's calendars are basically automated.
Okay.
But I can look into it. I have the power to schedule things.
Okay.
That's what I like to hear.
Yes.
But only what's already not taken, so
Yeah.
you would need to let me know well in advance.
And it gets complicated because we have our doodle poll and then we have to kind of find a place. And so my guess is we'll occasionally default back to this, but if we can find other times to meet other places.
When you say town hall, that does not include the police station?
Does not include the community room in the police station, no, I have no access to that.
I mean, I have heard that in terms of the library, that can be tricky, that gets booked. The police station, I don't know, I mean, I'm happy to wander down there and ask, you know,
Yeah,
how do you do your
who's
scheduling?
scheduling?
I mean, it's a decent room, it's,
Okay.
you know, I can find out.
Okay.
So I just have a concern about shifting around.
Mhm.
I worry about people trying to find us. So just having a place we can call our home, and I think is what I'd like to see if we possibly can.
I'm gonna have the community room under construction, so.
Oh.
The police station?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we may be here for a little while. And maybe that, you know, if we can make 5:30 work a lot of the time, it may be important for us to think about, if this is going to be our primary home, scheduling meetings that are really critical to make sure that we facilitate as much as we can public attending, having them at 5:30.
Yeah, I feel like if we want that more public to attend, I think they have to be more in town and better public transport access. Here there is, but more buses go to the center of town than here, so here you have to switch buses. So we can find, if you can find a place in town, it would be better.
Well, you know, for something like, I'm kind of thinking ahead to, if we get to the point where we're interviewing designers, we might want to find a way to get the big town room for that.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So where are we with it then?
Well, I think it sounds like we're going to be primarily here, but when we can get other spots, we'll try for it. And so what I'll do is when Debbie sends out the doodle polls, I'll talk to Anthony and see if there are anything, if there's anything free. If there isn't, then we'll probably default back to here.
So do you want me to check with the police?
I think it's worth finding out who
All right.
schedules it, you know, until it goes into construction. It might provide us another venue. I tend to think the library will be even harder to schedule than town hall, but
And I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I don't know how much we'll be working in the summer and what frequency, but this will become difficult then.
that's true too, yeah.
How long is the construction of the community room at the police station?
Probably weeks.
Just weeks, okay.
Do it also.
Okay.
We'll report back.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry to extend this. What are the months in which it would be difficult to be here?
June 22nd.
Oh, the school's out.
Through August, right. This place
Okay,
gets
okay.
gets
So that
upended
totally
in the
makes
summer.
sense.
And there's
That
actually going to be
totally-
some summer camps, so it'll be chaos in this
That
building for a
totally
while.
makes sense. So I mean, that's just a good note to have, that basically
Yeah.
we know for a fact whether it's
After June 22nd until, you don't really want us back in the building until school's open, really.
You don't, you navigate around a lot of things
Yeah.
if you're trying to get through the building in the summer. The only thing that really stays untouched is the office, so.
Okay, we'll be finding a new home from June 22nd until whatever it is. I'm gonna call it September 1, but I know the kids will get back to work. Other comments, questions on location? Nope. Okay, moving on. Review invoices. Did I actually remember to print that invoice out, distribute it around? No, I didn't, but I do have it. So this is the latest invoice from recording our minutes. I took one for myself. This is for, I believe, meeting 6.
Thank you.
And a total of $81.25. And that's anticipated as she's getting into the process of it. It's becoming more efficient. Do you have any questions?
I'll move to accept.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
I'll sit with Deshaun tomorrow.
Yep. The last two items on the agenda for tonight are the budget, the overall budget, and the RFP or RFQ draft. I don't know which one we want to tackle first, which has higher priority. But think about, is there anything, I guess the question is there anything new to talk about budget? I could have just.
For $400 under the line item for the water quality system.
Okay.
And potentially 2,000 for the second one, because we might not need a second grade of move.
Okay.
Yes.
Good news.
Feel good news item.
Yeah. So we got other bills coming in later. It's good to be ahead, moving on. Well, let's then move right on to the RFQ draft.
So in addition to any other changes submitted at the last session, I have added a project phase and work plan section, part 1, a template largely stolen from the NSBA format with the time periods filled in based on Christine's budget. That is the only major change. I have no particular agenda for what to talk about as far as this, so
Just a trivial point, the statement of interest did go in, so it's after the fact.
Were we planning on having a pre-submission conference at today's conference?
I think it would make sense. People would want to see the site, and it's usually better to do that in a controlled way, especially given the nature of the site, but that is up to the committee. It's not a requirement.
It makes sense to me. I was just wondering, it's kind of funny. We've had this dummy date in here for a bidders conference for like weeks. And it's starting to drive me nuts. It's like this version issue, like, you know, is there a sense, I mean, do we have like a, is there something we could plug in there as we think when we have a bidders conference, or?
Well,
Working back from.
when do you want to publish? There's the question, when do you want to publish, when do you want the due dates to be? As a pre-submission conference would be in the middle.
Yeah. I guess it would be worth kind of working through whether people have questions or comments on the current draft. And then we feel like we're getting closer to the end of the draft process. I don't know if the working group needs to meet again, but we should probably figure out a formal schedule.
I guess I'll say, I am starting to feel pretty good about part 1.
Yeah.
I feel like we have got that, there's parts to fill in that are highlighted, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Part 3, I think we're getting close. I think we're not done, but I think we can get there in relatively short order. After that, I would probably want to have the committee review the actual designer contract, which will be included as an attachment. Those are the major things. There's other attachments to look at, but most of that is just data.
That doesn't quite answer your question.
No, actually, I was making a mistake when reading through it, assuming that the dates, some of the dates were target dates and some of them weren't. And now I'm realizing that was my own illusion. Essentially, they're dummy dates. So I withdraw the question.
Placeholders.
Yeah.
Maria?
So are we going to comment on what we've got here? So they don't have page numbers, so I think we're going to have to.
It's going back and forth between Word and
Yeah,
Google
yeah.
Docs. All that formatting gets lost.
So
The
I
final
guess-
version we probably should.
Maybe let me start with the end of part 1, and then I'll work back from there. So this is where you put in those tables. So because it's largely copied and pasted in from MSBA, there's a lot of stuff on there that would be completely not applicable. So everything basically from final evaluation of alternatives, yeah, that would be there because that's what we're producing at the end of this, but everything from there on that says preferred solution, final design program, schematic design, design development, construction, that all needs to
I
go.
would just differ on the one point of the recommendation of preferred solution, that should stay in. That they should be giving us, although we have many alternatives developed and they'll have some kind of costs associated with them, that the designer of the feasibility study should be making a recommendation of what they think is the strongest.
So for what they're thinking.
Yes, to us.
Whether we or the town agrees with that ultimately is a
different.
different story
Mhm.
entirely.
Will we have by that time, some guidance from school committee about any more specifics.
Probably not.
We'd have a kind of a chicken egg problem.
How so?
So they're going to be giving us alternatives, but, if we don't have more specifics on enrollment and so on, how would we know?
I don't know that we won't be accepting a preferred solution as part of our charge. It doesn't completely answer that issue, but it would be nice to have more.
But I would think that
clarity, but
in
it might
a
not
sort
be
of a
good.
no state of change, you could evaluate the proposals based on the information that we do have, rather than things that we don't know.
Yeah, I would assume assumption X, Y, and Z would lead to conclusion 1. And then if we choose to not accept that, we can't. Or our successors.
I think one of the differences is a state of no change. Here we are talking of pre-K to 6. Right now, formula is K through 6. So we, in the specifications and number of classrooms, that's going to have to change. It's not the same number, because here it would be pre-K to 6, and we have to specify the number per grade.
Yes, I thought we talked about pre-K.
No, it
Here
is.
Oh,
it is,
okay.
but
Currently, today, right,
Today
there's no
we don't
pre-K.
have, so.
Right, but my point was, we're not different from the information that's in the proposal, even if that's different than what we have on the site right now.
Somewhere that information has to be transmitted to the designers.
So I just then want to come back to, so if we are going to have an assumption and have some preferred solution, I'm a little confused about it being their preferred solution versus ours.
It's a recommendation, it's a professional recommendation. It's like, you go to your doctor and they say, we think you have this, and you say, I'm going to get a second opinion. Then you go and do it. So it's just their recommendation of what all of the viable alternatives are, compared to how much they cost and what they would recommend to proceed with. So it's just an informed professional opinion, and they can give us the reasons why they've chosen those things and what they base, like the caveats that they base those opinions on, and then we have it documented, and it's not just the opinion of this committee or the recommendation of this committee to the school committee. It has some professional expertise behind it.
And also, I think an objectivity.
Yeah. It's non-binding, of course, it's just a recommendation,
Yeah.
so that, and so that they will have done all this work on sussing out the building and looking at it, so it seems like it's just worthwhile to get a recommendation. It doesn't mean you have to take it, it just means you use it to inform your discussion, something to push against, something to...
I guess I was thinking something more along the lines of these are the pros and cons and the risks, benefits of each of them. And because, for them to give a recommendation, you come at that from a certain perspective. It's just like, well, we can do this from, this is the cheapest way to do it, or we can, I can recommend this to you as this is the greenest way to do it, or, a recommendation is going to have something driving, what would be that recommendation. And then that could be very many different things. So I guess I'd be more comfortable with just having these are the options that we've come up with, and these are the pros and cons of each of them.
I think that they would be doing that regardless, but because there are many criteria, like you've just elaborated on, and that some of them may be considered more than another, I think having their professional recommendation of what they see as the strongest outcome, sort of it'll be the most prudent fiscally regardless. I think it just is wise to get their opinion on what they think is the most viable solution. And like you said, we don't have to follow them. And they should all have pros and cons.
Yeah.
And I think the recommendation would inherent in recommendation would be pros and cons, and reason, kind of describing why this is the recommended solution, and that would point out the advantages of that solution and the disadvantages of the other solutions.
And it may not be particularly clear. I mean,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
often, this one is slightly better.
Mhm.
But we again, would choose, your successor group would choose a different path, because the criteria change, time changes, budgets change, I don't know.
So is your concern that if a recommendation is made, that it'll be hard to deviate from it?
Oh, I think that sets things on an uneven turf, and I think that it's a subjective call, ultimately. What's better, right? And I just think that I'm not comfortable with handing the decision about what's better over to the designer to make.
But I guess,
that judgment.
I guess we'd be getting a recommendation on which, not necessarily what's best for the community, but what the best design alternatives are. And so I guess I don't necessarily see this much as subjective as much as it's someone's professional opinion that from a design perspective, cost perspective, however they're going to analyze it, that this would be the recommendation.
I think the difference is it's not a decision, it's just a recommendation. And we also have to recognize that this entire process will be repeated. So I think there's a nice part about having a recommendation is that since the exercise will be repeated, to find out if there's actually if those recommendations line up, if there's some part of those two feasibility studies that say, yeah, these continue to be the pros, these continue to be the red flags, these continue to be the concerns. So I think that having that really well identified and qualified and even quantified is really helpful for this committee and any committee in the future.
Well, I think there's another problem that we have to talk about, and that is if the intention is fully to go through an MSBA process, it is very specific that you are going there with a problem, not a solution. They're very clear about that. So should we get accepted into the MSBA and need to go through many parts of it, hopefully we should have all the site evaluation, a lot of it will have already been done, but you do not get accepted and say, right, we've got something that we're already,
Approach we're already thinking about, you're right about that, absolutely.
So in my mind, though, that should give us comfort that we can take a recommendation from the designer and know that as a matter of fact, it really isn't going to be. I mean, what you just said is true, which means in all likelihood, whatever recommendation we get is like really not going to be binding because it won't be able to be binding. You know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right. If we go into the MSB process again, we are going to have to go in there with a committed, open mind around looking at the design again. So to me, then, taking the professional judgment of the people we bring on board is just a useful data point to get. Since we know it's literally not going to lead in all likelihood. I mean, I suppose that's not literally true. If for some reason we failed getting to MSBA and there was a design alternative that came forward that involved some level of, either additions or partial demolition of construction, I mean, if you could convince the town to pay for it, then we might be able to move forward with that. But
As opposed to the other path.
As opposed to the other path. But I'm just saying, but to me that, I don't know, there are a lot of variables that go into that make it seem not that risky to take some professional judgment that, especially as it's presumably aligned along with, like, my assumption is what we're offering, I hate to say this, is like open enough in terms of our outcome that I would be interested in knowing from the people who do this all the time, are they actually going to give a hard recommendation unless the facts lead that way, or will they actually give essentially a preferred solution of a menu of solutions where they say, well, if under these circumstances we think this would be the best thing, but if those circumstances aren't met, then this would be the next best thing and the best thing given these circumstances. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it is not uncommon. I mean, the designer is going to have to look at the conditions, look at the building, look at the options, and look at what we've said we're concerned with, whether that's sort of energy or many of the other things that are already on our radar or our list. And they can form an opinion about that. But it's not unusual for the client to come back and say, yes, but, we really actually prefer this one for some set of our own reasons. And sometimes it's not very clear. Maybe there's two options that seem to be at the top, and it really is, it's not as common, but we professionally feel that these two things are viable. It's really up to the owner to decide between a set of options.
Based on what's important.
So I guess the question in front of us at the moment is whether or not, that piece gets put into this text or not, whether we include, a recommendation of preferred solution as part of this. Somewhat related to this is, I'm trying to think forward towards the end of the whole process. So we're going to get a report back, we'll get the study back from the designer. It'll either have a recommended preferred solution or not. Are we as a group charged with sort of commenting on this? In other words, do we offer our communal voice as whether we agree with this solution or not? I don't know the answer to that, because I don't remember enough about the initial charge for the committee to know if we're going to have an official kind of vote to accept or not any recommendation before it is.
I thought we were meant to make a recommendation.
If we are supposed to make a recommendation, I think we have to make a recommendation based on the criteria that we have and not by the designers. The designer might want because of some reason that is not the same reason that we have. And if we have to go against what the designer proposes, then things get a little trickier. We have to work twice as hard to propose something that might not be what the designer proposes.
Well, we should be working interactively with the designer anyways, and so if we should have a sense before the final report if they're supporting a solution. And so at that time, we would want to engage them to understand why we wouldn't agree with their motion, why they hold their position.
So I'm kind of in that same line that they're reflecting our desires, our
Right.
opinions, our priorities in the development of a variety of standards, so that we should be leading them to the proper, quote, solution.
I think it would depend, the recommendation would be very different whether we are going to be going, the second step is going to be an MSBA or is it going to be town planning. So it's going to be a very different task along the way.
Right.
It was when we were committed to this process, it was not clear that this would be definitely to an MSBA application. So I think it's sometimes the solutions might be completely different if we go to the MSBA or we don't go to the MSBA. So having the flexibility to decide after the fact would be.
Or as Jim's saying, we can give them that direction.
Okay, so
Sorry, go ahead.
this appointment is effective as of October 17th, 2017, and will continue until the committee presents a final report to the Amherst School Committee and town meeting that encompasses work done to date and viable site options. So we're charged with making.
Right. Okay. And so the designer study becomes part of that report.
Of site options.
And so we could conceivably, if it seems, if the potential for a town-funded option is equally as real a potential as the state-funded option, or part of the state-funded option, then we can charge the designer to rank the options based on each, so we can understand them and see how they impact the final choices. I just don't personally know whether or how that decision gets made.
I just have a hard time with us putting a lot of eggs in the MSBA basket because we have no idea how that's going to turn out. So everybody's saying our intention is to apply to MSBA. Like, we don't know that. We don't know if they're going to accept us. We don't know how long the line would be. We don't know, like, that process I feel like can be concurrent, but our intention is not to do this for the MSBA process. So I take pause when we keep talking about the MSBA process because that's no idea.
Oh, right. And before this, there was some language about providing a range of options that span a range of budgets. Did you guys already talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like this is kind of getting at the heart of MSBA versus non-MSBA. What is really going to be the deciding factor in what could very well potentially be the deciding factor. If the town goes it alone, our budget will probably be significantly less than what we will have the opportunity for if we do get accepted into MSBA in a reasonable time frame. So I was just wondering, what did I miss in that discussion, if it happened, and how, and if it feels relevant to this, because I could see, you know, given this price point, this is the way we should go, given this price point, this is the way we should go. And because it is such a huge unknown, like, to me, that's the big, like, difference in pursuit of options.
Hey, you didn't miss anything. It wasn't.
I think we started at the bottom.
No, I mean, well, you missed a lot.
Yeah.
But the point is not on the subject. And
This is probably the most important part that you missed.
yeah, exactly.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah, he can't vote yet, but he is here. And actually, by the end of it, you can talk.
Oh.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not trying to be a goof. I just mean, like, you know, other than voting, you should feel free to participate and raise your hand. But no, you didn't miss anything. And I didn't say it very artfully earlier, but that was actually part of what I was trying to echo, that my assumption was, even on preferred alternatives, there might very well be more than one preferred alternative given changing criteria or assumptions that are being made about those alternatives. I mean, that
Or
they,
price point or timeline.
right, in that the X factor would be, to me, more of an empirical one, that if they got into analyzing the building or the site, they might say there are constraints around reuse of the building or the site that hopefully would be able to be proven by the evidence. It's not like just their opinion. But in the absence of that, my assumption is that there was going to be probably a range of options that came out of this that came at it precisely from, like, I hate to say, it's not really an issue if you had all the money in the world, but I think the observation was made earlier is absolutely true, that if you went with if you did get into the MSBA and went that route, it likely could be a more substantially funded project than if the town is doing it on its own. I mean, that's a guess on my part, but the entire point is we can't, I think it'd be a mistake for us to over-determine these categories right now, because the entire point of doing this process is to learn from it. My point is simply that whether it's 4 or 5 different options, or whether the preferred alternatives in the end from our consultant end up being 3 options, it's likely that what's going to create those 3 options and sort of their rankings are going to be some of the criteria we're talking about around the site, the greening of it, how much money we have, and what the process is, and that there'd be a preferred alternative given different sets of assumptions.
And all, we have to have at least 3 options, and all have to be viable.
Right,
And
that are
that's an
viable.
important thing. There may be 8 options they initially discuss with us, but they're not all going to be viable. Agreed?
Okay, I think part of I think we have to assume the same budget. I don't think we should go, okay, if it's the town is one budget, if it's MSBA, it's another budget. I think we have to set that range. And if I'm saying in construction, I think we have to have a certain range, and we cannot say a budget, B budget. I think we should stick to say this budget range, because it thinks that's going to make more viable the solutions. Because if we get something that is, if we get a solution that costs 3 times more than the other one, then how useful is that answer for us? I don't think it's going to be very useful. I would say we have to go with a solution assuming certain parameters. We can have some leeway, but it has to be within, I don't know, say 20%, 30% price range. But I would not say one option is 100% more expensive than the other, because then it's very hard to compare those solutions.
So,
Okay, so I agree and disagree at the same time. So I think we do need a range of options that cost different money. So that, there's the addition and renovation option, there's the, full addition option, there's a complete new construction option. I think that there's a range of sort of interventions that should be proposed for the school that have different cost points. So I think that that's important. And I think in the process, you would have maybe 3 renovation options that you could compare and say, yes, these are all the same cost, but this one's better for whatever. And then the same thing with the addition, and then the same thing with new construction. However, part I agree with is that regardless of financing, these should be only recommended on what's viable and cost appropriate, regardless of the financing options. Financing is a completely different decision than cost and net present value of cash.
And to follow up on that, I mean, if we're trying to build a 100-year building versus building a 20-year building,
yeah.
like, those are significantly different cost effective, and I don't think we want to constrain ourselves to finding a budget for a 20-year building or a building that doesn't have solar panels or is not, I think there's going to be some minimum standards that the community will feel that are important. So, following up on that, so are we trying to mark up?
Yes,
there
that's
was-
kind of circles us back around. This has been a very good conversation. I want to make sure that I've captured, or that we've captured, comments so that we can move the draft forward. And I'm not sure I feel like we've fully teased out something here, or maybe Anthony feels differently, but.
This entire conversation was about whether we
Yeah.
remove this
Yeah.
row
Yeah.
of this table or
Forwards.
not.
Yeah.
I think the consensus is do not remove row 6 from this table.
But talk further about what is
Yeah.
going to go into a recommendation.
There is also the remove the ones following. it.
Yeah, I think it's,
So
I
there
think
was
all the ones
agreement on
following
that.
it, all the ones about schematic design,
Yeah.
those do go. I think those.
Does that sound like a fair summary of the discussion?
I mean, I would disagree with the conclusion, because I think that if we actually do go back to our charge, I still think that it's.
It doesn't
we're
charge us
not-
with that.
We're not, I don't think we're charged with zeroing in on one. I think we're charged with providing an array of options based on the mission statement that we received from the school committee and from the documents from Dr. Morris.
Well, let's not close it then, and maybe ask for some clarification from school committee.
I'm not sure you're going to get it.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think the question ends up being how you, this may be something you're talking about doing and working group further,
Yeah.
is how do you dig into this question? I mean, I think the way that Christine described it a moment ago, and Heather, together, that you might end up having anyway a series of options. It could be based on the quality. I mean, it could be other criteria other than just rough price, but the point is, since it looks, even if you had 3 or 4 categories, the way Christine described it a moment ago is you could have a variety of potential designs or alternatives within each category, which would mean that the designer would still be being asked to provide their preferred solution within each option, as opposed to, in other words, at some point they have to winnie it down and provide some kind of, so even if you don't have literally one preferred solution, but even there, if you go back to the feasibility question, part of the question would be, what do you empirically, what drives that decision on their part? Is there something in the end about the combination of charges and criteria that come together that make them say, well, we thought we could come forward with 3 different options that would all be equally viable with alternative design and construction methods, but it turns out it all kind of narrows down to one thing or one thing with a couple side options. I mean, I wouldn't want to force their professional judgment to end up saying that there's a multitude of viable, of desirable, viable options if in their professional judgment they didn't think that was the case either. I mean, yeah, that makes no sense.
Yeah, and I do hear what you're saying, because I have the mission statement that we were given, and it does say, viable options, certainly says that. But the other thing that it says is to make recommendations. So while I think, pursuing all of the options and knowing the pros and cons that are associated with them, and what those things mean in the future, I think we do need to gather all that information and have it, sort of codified. But I do think that we're also required with making recommendations to the school committee. So.
You're saying we are supposed to make recommendations, not the designer. That's the charge.
Yeah, it's true, but I guess that even if the designers make recommendations, we can accept or reject those recommendations. I think that that's the difference, is that just because it says that they're going to make recommendations doesn't mean that that's what we have to put forward to the school committee. It just means that it helps inform our decision-making.
I mostly just have a question to the architects at the table, which is if a client came to you and said, I want you to come to me with your early alternatives, and then I want you to come up with your final set of alternatives, and then I don't want to hear from you about what you think of it, what your recommendation is. Would that make sense to you, or would you kind of look cross-eyed?
It would be a little unusual.
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, there would be an expectation to help the client rank the alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
And if we change that word, sometimes changing a word doesn't change the intent, but if nothing else, we would want the designer to help us rank the options so that we have a way of assessing our recommendation.
I have two things. One, could we change it to preferred solutions?
Yeah.
That could be, but at the same time, it goes back to what we are asking at the beginning. At the beginning, we asked for these 3 proposals. We didn't ask multiple proposals within each category of renovation. We said 3 proposals, so they can come and say, well, we look at one in each category. We wouldn't have what you were saying, not maybe we would have multiple proposals at the beginning.
Yeah, I think the way it starts the actual work process is if, you don't have to say, like, this is the best one for this. Like, it's a process, it's iterative, there's a lot of feedback, so I think that there might be there's more than one that's explored, but that would actually come to, a point.
And I would answer your question that we've all put forth our best effort, and we put forth our options, and we think this is great and wondrous, and it's rejected outright. We just don't accept your recommendation and proceed on the customer. Sorry.
Well, I was just saying, we're hiring these people to be our consultant. This is a collaborative process we're entering upon. And I want to make sure this group goes into that process as we're hiring these people to be a resource to us, to work with us, to come to a consensus with us. And I hope we find somebody that will do that. And I think that will be part of our selection process, finding, and that's what architects are trained to do. We take that job very seriously.
I just want to circle back to a point that Heather made earlier about the difference between a 20-year building and a 100-year building. And I think that part of the criteria in that or part of the facts in that we should not let go of is that while maybe a shorter-term building might be less costly up front, that these have life cycle cost decisions that apply to the town for many years afterwards as far as operation and maintenance. And that some of that information should be included in the report about anticipated costs of running and operating the different options.
And that is something we would want the designer to assist us with assessing.
Right.
I think that was in the.
100% sure that's in our.
Yeah.
Is it in our RFP?
I think so.
I thought it
But
was.
let's
Double
check
check.
it.
Because that's actually extremely useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I back up since we're already past that part?
Yep.
In the, I think it was page 4, this designer shall
We
present
didn't,
abstract.
we didn't tackle it.
We didn't go in order, we jumped
Oh,
the
Yeah.
boxes.
jump. Okay, well, I will let you
Can we-
continue to jump.
Do folks feel comfortable jumping somewhere else, knowing we'll talk about this more?
Well, I heard that there's a recommendation or a proposal, a suggestion that we just wordsmith and take the word recommendation out and here offer preferred solutions.
Identify.
Yeah, identify.
I like that. Other people like that?
I personally am one that I'm looking to these experts to consult with us because I want their expert opinion.
Yeah.
So I think about the reports I ask for from the school lens, I want them to give me their 2 cents.
I don't think that's the question. My question is, who's making who's the decision maker? So that I just want to make sure that that's not
That's us.
taken out of.
Ultimately, it's us.
Yeah, it's never
We're
gonna
the
be,
decision maker.
never gonna be the, so.
Looking back on that same page with where the table starts, there's some wonkiness with weeks, with time frame there. And also the second paragraph under project phase and work plan, but on that next page, through approval of schematic design. So obviously, the schematic design is not what we're going to have. And 40 weeks, it's 40 weeks as follows, which sum to 23 weeks, so we have to kind of square that circle.
In that table, could we make it a little more clear about like fall in court? Like usually there's a bit of back and forth, like the designer completes their work, then we have a certain amount of time for us to need to make our decision. I didn't quite follow the table in that regard about like, you have 4 weeks to do your work, we have 2 weeks to respond, you have, or do we not see it kind of working that way?
I think we do. I see it working that way.
Yeah.
I think that sort of project timeline outline that I put together has a fair amount of like presentation time and garnering community feedback, which is essentially the 2 weeks that you're talking about where we review and make decisions. I think that we should add some of that pause point to sit milestone. Really, they're milestone moments where you're making a decision and providing direction to proceed or to not. And I think that we could probably clarify that.
We probably also want to get rid of the third column of that table, because that's not really applicable. I mean,
Oh, that could be, this third column might be the placeholder for the
Yeah.
Like I said,
milestone
this,
decision
yeah,
point.
This format
that's
is
an
so much-
MSBA
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Heather, you had
Oh, yeah, the
some
backing up,
comments?
the designer shall present revised draft of the first word, I think page 4.
Yeah, I may have flipped these out of the draft, just where it's not coming up here.
Do you want to start by page 1, 2, 3, we can go in order?
Yeah.
Well, let's let Heather.
Oh, well,
point.
but I'm trying to orient, actually. It was
Yeah.
1A, page 4, 1A is my notes, 50 available funds per project. I think it was the language stolen from the SUNY, the State University of New York, Higher
In
Education Building
consultation
Fund.
with the town community using it in order to.
Yeah, there's a bunch of language in there about consultation with the campus that I think we need to be
Yeah.
like changing that
Yeah.
to community.
Oh,
And there was,
E. That's the email that we got also.
Yes.
Ah,
We're
there we are.
we're on page 4.
There, here it is, right there.
Yes.
yeah, there's lots
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
campuses in that whole thing.
To do a
Um,
find and
Find
Replace.
and replace all that.
Right.
And so the campus and the fund, which is the State University Construction Fund, which is, obviously not who we are. And then there's also language in there, 1A about possible, to determine whether possible options fit the funds available for the project. Well, since that's not a predetermined thing,
Yeah.
we've got to change that.
To determine appropriate funding of funds.
And the other thing, just to open up a whole other can of worms, hopefully not, I don't know. You know, the town, the new net zero bylaw only applies to new construction and vehicle conditions. But I would like to have that piece of information about how feasible, if we embark upon a renovation project, or exploring that, like what would it mean to make a renovation project net zero? And even if the answer is it's completely infeasible, I think we need to know that, because if we're trying to compare apples to apples, that's a piece of information that we need to be able to show the qualitative difference between a renovation project and an addition project, even though the net zero bylaw doesn't apply.
Wouldn't require.
Wouldn't require.
But it should be explored.
I would
Or
agree.
at least looked at.
Yeah, because people will ask that
Yeah.
question. People will ask, why aren't you doing a net zero building if we're not? And it's
Yeah.
good to have an answer to that.
So I forget where in the thing we talk about net
Yeah.
zero, but new buildings will be,
Yeah.
right, the new buildings and additions will consider the town. So that, to me, that line sort of implies that you don't even have to like, if you're looking at the
I don't think that would be
renovation.
necessarily the
Okay.
intent. I think we were in that line trying to point to the fact that we have this bylaw.
Yeah.
And that folks who are applying need to understand we have this bylaw as part of their application process.
It says that later too,
Yeah.
so you
It's
should
in
be
there twice.
aware, so maybe it just gets stricken from there, I don't know.
I've been wondering for a while whether, and this is sort of, I guess, a question of sort of term of art for these kind of proposals, was that strong enough language? Because it seemed, the construction seemed, the way it was written, the construction seemed a little passive in the sense that you should be aware there is this law, as opposed to,
Thou shalt comply with this.
no, just that way, well, that's why I was wondering whether it was unnecessary to write it in, because anyone looking at it would be like, well, we're gonna comply with
Part of
a town bylaw.
Part of the reason I've written it in kind of a passive way is that the Attorney General still has not certified this bylaw. It's the only bylaw from that meeting that hasn't been certified. I don't know what the timeline is. One assumes it will be in effect when this building goes up, but I don't
Well,
know.
okay.
Well, the other thing that might
And-
cover that sort of analysis is just sort of like a green or lead analysis. I mean, that would probably give us enough information as long as we're,
Right.
applying the same standards
Yeah.
to a renovation project that we are to
I think
construction.
in part three that it
Yeah.
gets into more of the detail on that, but we can bring some of the wording into
Forward.
part one.
Yeah.
The cynical voice at the table, we've only got $150,000. The more complex we make this, the more watered down the product will be.
I understand that concern, but I think we want to make sure we have the designers, I think that's an important charge that they look at this aspect.
I think this, I was thinking about the funding. We have 2 weeks allocated for the project recommendation, but they have to make a recommendation whether that money was well spent in that or was the money that they spent one time deciding. So my understanding is that we have allocated.
Jim
spend
just
money-
saved us $800. That's 4 more hours of
But-
architect work.
But that's for the from the architect's point of view, whether we want those 2 weeks spent.
I don't think those 2 weeks are necessarily them working on that task. They have to produce it in that timeframe. We would expect that kind of turnaround. But yes, we want to make sure we get as much design time.
So that's why if we shorten, if we say, okay, we want to make a decision about the recommendation, we have, presumably if we come this week, those 2 weeks that we will have them more in the design time. That might be relevant. So I think that has to be part of our decision when we do this meeting.
Is time always money though? I mean, to me, I haven't worked on architectural buildings, but I used to do a lot of like firm level economic planning and stuff like that. The calendar of we expect you to give this deliverable at this point, this deliverable at that point, it might say it's like 2 weeks later. That 2 weeks may or may not translate into how much additional labor is going into that task. Sometimes it means you actually have a bunch of people, at least in our experience, a bunch of people in an office who are actually working overtime to almost like catch up to getting the deliverable done. And actually that's usually more typical than the reverse, which is you have everything kind of cooked and done. You have your feet up on a desk, excited about how much work you've done. So I just mean, I'm not sure you're switching the weeks of when the deliverable comes in. is actually buying you more product or not. I don't know if that relates.
Yeah, and the recommendation or the assessment of options is really a subtask to putting the final report together. Because we want a document that we all have commented on, looked at, at some level acknowledged. And that's part of that task. And that's not necessarily, as you say, it's not necessarily 2 weeks. It's maybe more or less. It's the bodies and the time frame are that close to it.
Yeah, I see this as being the time that they would integrate the comments that they got from us into the recommendations, and they would need time to do that. Are we going through this page by page, or?
Sure, let's go back to the beginning. We've hopped in, but let's just do this page by page, and if there's nothing, we'll go quickly, and if there's nothing, it'll take us a while. But part 1, page 1, any comments here?
Just a little one on line 7 where it says green building design. I don't think we need to have the quotes around that, or zero net energy building, the quotes, just.
You're on part 3.
Oh, I'm on part 3.
Yeah,
What part are we at?
part-
part one.
Oh, man, sorry about that. So I only have.
We're not hopping around.
Where's part 1?
Did we handed it out?
Ah, here it is.
Yes.
I had it caught behind something. Okay, never mind.
I had this.
So part 1, page 1.
Ben, we've been looking at this for weeks, by the way, so if you feel like you're catching up, it's just.
A lot of catching up.
I helped on it, and I still feel like we're catching up. Let's turn the page. Nobody's saying
Okay,
anything.
good. Good with that. Page 2, part 1, page 2. The project
Going.
objectives. Going. Page 3. Page 4 brings us back to the note on campus and other things that don't apply to us.
And at the bottom,
Yep.
there is, so one is highlighting the end of the years available. I think we're going to complete that information with the information.
I actually have those, so I can tell you what years are available.
Okay.
So did you want to include the years? Or did you want to include the reports, or not? Given that
I briefly lost track of this.
Sorry.
About says environmental assessments and
Okay.
curriculum urban are underway currently. Results of assessments from previous years available.
Yeah, so we're acquiring a very long list right now of previous studies and data. And I'm curious, a lot of this stuff is things that the eventual designer will need to know.
Yeah.
I'm curious how much is necessary to provide the designer in the bidder stage.
I think it's almost more important just to know they will have access to that. I don't think they necessarily need to have all of it at the time of proposal, in my opinion.
So it goes back to also the second line afterwards. Recently, the phrase kind of looks awkward and things we should add are available. This will be provided to the bidding winner, or I think those two should be combined and said to be provided to the bidding winner.
Realistically, did that come through you?
Yes, or at least I saw it.
I would just strike, seems like sustainable energy conditions will consider the town's net zero energy bylaw. Potentially just strike it because we'll talk about later. Where is it, particularly in this section?
Except that there was a sentiment expressed that all designs should consider a net zero energy
That would,
format.
then this would be the.
I
right place.
share Jim's skepticism that hurts us more than helps us, but if that is what the committee wants, then I think I'd replace it with a line more like all options shall consider net zero energy.
Feasibility.
Yeah, something like that.
And we have to remember, this is the level of the study, so how they consider zero net energy or green design in general is going to be at a different level, a different depth than if we were a schematic designer or further on.
Can you even reach net zero on a renovation when you're using the existing physical plan unless you're purchasing carbon offsets? I mean, what
Yes, we can.
Is carbon offsets
Really?
we're purchasing?
If we put enough solar panels in the field, we can make it. I am
Well,
going
what
through
is,
this
what is
now.
a renovation too? I mean, if we tear everything down but leave the steel standing?
Yeah.
I mean, so, right. So then it's like,
I guess maybe we don't need to say this here, but I think the intent is eventually when we're working with a designer, we want to make sure that they explore as much, makes sense at the level we're at in a renovation. You don't want to ignore it. You don't want to say, okay, we're just going to stop and we're not going to do anything to the system beyond changes we need to make the place more functional or something like that. This next page we talked about, this is from 5 now. Pretty in-depth. Any more comments on this next page?
Yeah, above, there's the local bylaws, the page, and then the large paragraph above that, it talks about construction documents and construction contract, so those obviously are not necessary.
Oh, here, right.
Or am I on the wrong page?
Page 4, the paragraph
Oh,
beginning,
here.
basic services include, she's right.
Toward the bottom.
Take over. There we go. Yes, thank you.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wait. Are we striking the whole thing, or
We're still
No.
just too in-depth with,
Preparenda.
right, with that stuff? But also, I feel like we had this discussion before, but the lighting designer is still in there, the acoustical designer is still in there. I mean, for this level, seems strange.
I think this paragraph is defining basic services for the purposes of what is covered under the contract.
I mean, those would make sense for something that you're taking through construction documents, but at the level of a feasibility study, seeing in
We've
the
gone back and
weeds.
forth a little bit on
I
how
am
much.
too. The only reason I really like the lighting and the acoustics is for daylighting.
Yeah,
Is for
because you have to
daylighting.
have massing that supports daylighting.
Yes, and acoustics, if English is your second language, acoustics are so important. So important to learning.
But
I mean, it's just so well documented metric in school performance and learning. And that can just, and that
I feel
can
like
be
it's a
simple, like the
level of-
volume of the space, you know, the recommendations on materials. And that just gets to finishes and what is appropriate costing.
basic services.
they can't not
Basic
address
environmental graphics.
this. You can't, whoever we have can't not address those issues.
Yeah, I just keep reading it like, well, who's your acoustical consultant that you're hiring for
Right.
that thing, and
It
it's
doesn't
not-
necessarily have to be a.
Well, the level that,
Yeah.
that you would need to bring somebody in for that, but I hear what you're saying as far as just massing of spaces.
The
You need to take
volume,
acoustics into
finishes.
consideration.
That was the question I was gonna have, is that, under those terms as described, I was looking at this list as something where, depending on the level of detail that they go into, they may simply have the firm level of competence to be able to address these issues in a professional, competent way, as opposed to having the level of technical expertise you'd actually be doing if you said, okay, we're actually gonna build this thing, let's get somebody in to
Design the wall
finish
system.
out
Yeah.
this part of the design. Is that right? I mean, that was a question, actually, not a statement.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Like, yes, you can have an architecture firm that has enough experience to know we could hire an acoustician and we're design a classroom.
That's the way. Talk a little bit more.
I think, when I think we have to remove the laboratory, I don't think we need to just.
Yeah.
Media center, I think.
Well, we have a computer room.
Yeah.
So, library and media, I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laboratory.
Yeah.
I think detailed, cost estimates is in here twice. And I think we could just change the last one to the life cycle cost estimating.
Yeah.
The basic environmental permitting, is that, it's kind of in the middle of that paragraph. Do we need that as well? It's specifically talking about the permitting, is that code for something that?
It's not code, I think the intent here is analysis of the wetlands and what is the allowable building area on the site. But it's definitely not permitting.
Yeah, it's not permitting, but we want to know base environmental assessments might be a better term.
Well,
It's
yeah.
like
The cost.
it's like a code review, but it's not.
But it's the cost that's going to go with it that we're really concerned about. Environmental concerns aren't substantial, but the cost will be, potentially.
There's protected, I think we're talking about sort of like, part of the site does have protections on it.
Yes.
But those are established, right? So it's a matter of
Exactly.
just need to take those into consideration. I don't think there's a study needed.
No, but I think we would want the wetlands reflagged, because the last time the wetlands were flagged was probably a while ago. So we would want to know the building area, getting back to Christine's comment. But permitting is definitely not the right.
Compliance, would that be the word? Basic environmental compliance review?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, I think this whole paragraph needs another pass through by the working group.
This is your legal definition, question mark.
Yes, question mark.
Okay. But even if it's this reads like a paragraph for a full project.
Correct.
And we're not getting that far. So if we were going on past the study, yes, we'd want basic environmental permitting. We're not gonna get that far. So I think we need to read this again, the working group, with that lens in mind, and it's just, we've got enough marks on here that it feels like it just needs to be rewritten, and we look at it afresh in a rewritten form.
Sounds like a nice idea.
Sure. Other questions, comments on this page? Nope. Yes. Okay, so now I think we're back on the page that has the table in it. Other than the items brought up earlier, are there additional items on this page?
Well, we have to figure out the time.
Yeah, but that we're gonna do the next one.
Did we decide on language for row 6?
I have identified preferred solutions as the last alternative option.
Is there like anywhere in here like language about production of a report?
Not in this chart, but
Because,
we
you know,
need
it's
to
like,
get the report.
You know, in lieu of construction contract documents, what
Right.
are they handing us?
They're handing us a report.
Yeah.
It's on Card Street.
No, that should really be somewhere in the objectives or scope of services, as to what deliverables are defined as.
It was in there before, but I mean, also, does it wouldn't kill us to have a box on this,
Yeah.
you know, timeline that also had that in it again.
Yeah, instead of what's finishing this page where it says final design program, really final report is what we want.
Yeah.
Well, back under project objectives, whatever page that is, the feasibility study shall, number one, present at least 3 viable options, and it goes on to discuss that. And 2, include the following elements. So, do you need something in addition to what's listed in 1 and 2 on those 2 pages?
I think we want to be explicit and say we want a final report.
What's a deliverable?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shall present revised drafts, and maybe just keep head off that.
Yeah.
Prevent at least 3.
Yeah, there's no.
It feels like it
doesn't
really wants to be either an item 3 or an item,
Or it heads it off, like.
Yeah.
The feasibility report shall include.
Include the following elements in a prepared final document to basically go through this.
and a nice bound thing that's got all the rankings and you know, something that could be shared with people who have not been involved in this process.
Well, you'd want a report, and we also want, whatever appendices, maybe want some
Right.
sort of presentation.
Yes.
Report and a presentation.
Yes,
So, you want a PowerPoint? You gotta say you want a PowerPoint.
that's true.
Yeah, I think being really clear about the deliverables is important.
Ain't no add-ons.
So to that end, I think we should clarify that part of the cost estimating will include reconciliation exercise with third parties.
Okay.
So wait, if it's a third-party estimator, that means that's someone who we'd be hiring, is that, and that's in our budget? Okay.
Yeah, the designer's gonna hire one, we're gonna hire our own independent, they'll hash out the major differences. Count my pages here. Still in part 1. Are we done with page 5? Page 6 is mostly struck and stuff.
Yeah, all
Struck.
those, all four lines of that table are gone.
Yeah. And is the pre-bid conference optional, or do we want to make it mandatory? Is that a choice we can make?
That is a choice you can make as to whether you have it and as to whether you require people to be there.
So we already talked about wanting to have it.
Yeah, I think we want to have it. Personally, I would like to make it mandatory, because I'd really rather not end up with someone who have not seen the building on the site.
I love calling out those who don't show up.
Yeah, it's an easy way to reduce the group. But what do people think about making it mandatory?
Yeah, I'd like it.
So,
I do, so, said we're nowhere near setting a date, but I'm curious what kind of advance notice the school will need to accommodate a group of potentially very large group coming through. Probably want to do it what time of day.
Look to your right.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
How much time we want?
Yeah, I mean, it's a large group, they're going to be supervised the entire time, but
Yeah.
it's still potentially disruptive.
Are we summer or not summer?
Not summer.
Not summer.
Not
Any
summer.
curriculum things in there? That's what I'm thinking.
And not that aren't already occupied.
Routine.
We've got a large agenda and not everything that we need to do for the
I
school
don't
year.
think we need to
You
involve
would-
you, we just want to
no, it
walk.
would be Jim
So that
probably
there's no
leading it.
kids
Yeah.
there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
and not disruptive to what
Yeah.
will be happening.
Gotcha. Yeah, that can be arranged anytime. I mean, how many people are we talking?
You could be talking 30 or 40 people.
Oh.
I mean, we want a good turnout. I mean, ultimately,
So,
maybe more.
curriculum day.
Curriculum day, no, we gotta get some early release time.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And things are presumably simpler after 3:15, 3:30.
For sure.
Most of the kids are out here, not all.
Yeah, we still have the after-school program that
Yeah.
goes until 5:30, but it's,
Yeah.
they're used to people being around too.
Yeah.
We don't want to do it on MCAS.
No. Yeah, we have an early release day in May. May 11th, I believe is the date.
If we can keep this progress going,
Yeah.
I'd like to shoot for a goal.
That's a nice idea.
Nothing like a deadline.
I
It's
think
out there.
it's
And
May
how
9th.
how long will it, I mean, an hour we're talking?
Couple three,
Yeah.
How long?
couple three.
Oh,
But not all,
geez,
probably not
okay.
all that time in the building.
Okay.
I mean, they would come through the building, they'd also need to see the site.
Mhm.
Hour and a half, conceivably.
Would you do
I
any
mean,
kind of a sit-down with them?
Yeah, ideally, yeah, you want to kind of set the stage for the
Yeah,
event.
yeah.
And then you want to walk around the building. I'm just thinking of all the ones that we want to. You know, you really want to see all the important spaces, anything that's unique or different in each part of the building.
Yeah, so that can't be with students.
No, yeah.
Definitely not.
You know,
Okay.
they're going to traipse through the building like
Yeah.
like the Halloween parade.
On May 9th, there is a early release day, Wednesday, May 9th.
It's not the 11th? No, May 9th it is then.
It's a Wednesday, I don't think
Yeah.
you'll put it on a Friday.
No.
Yes, well, that'll be our target.
Mhm.
Great.
Good. Okay.
Other than that, we have to have a hard time getting that kind of time without kids. I mean, and 3:15 is workable,
Okay.
and that's anytime.
There's the after-school programs on our releases, right? It's really, it's just that you can schedule it an hour earlier, but the impact on the school will be the same. These other releases as we
Yeah. Part 3, take 1.
Number 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quotes.
Hearing about that.
I don't know
yeah.
why, I don't know why there's no quotes.
That's one of those things, some people quote, put
Yeah.
quotes around them that,
Yeah, it just stopped me when I was reading it. And then I don't know if we want to include lead, I mean, since especially if we do the, we might need to do lead. So I think we probably want to mention it,
Yeah.
even though it's mentioned in other places, but since we're listed.
Page 2.
I have,
Oh.
no, on page 2, the selection process.
Yep.
I think this page goes between a board and a committee.
You're right.
So in the selection process, in some paragraphs we've taken a board and some paragraphs is a committee, so I think we have to be consistent about that.
It should probably just say subcommittee.
Subcommittee, but the first paragraph
Yep,
of the
yep.
selection says board.
I see, you're right.
Is your expectation that if they were reviewed by a subcommittee, is that you'd actually have who it's comprised of?
I would think we would, yeah, unless we're not prepared to make that decision yet, and it won't be before it goes live, but I would think we would send it to commission and those people. Don't have to, not required.
Okay.
So I think we should put in the agenda the discussion about whether we have a subcommittee or is it the full committee that's going to be revised, and we should make the decision soon.
Yeah, so I will add that. I will copy the agenda.
So we could include the agenda.
Yeah, right, in case.
Anthony, do we have, I know, and forgive me if you have answered this, but do we have clarity on how the process with the town manager and the subcommittee would be? We will recommend the subcommittee, but that will have to be approved by the town manager? Is
I
that
don't think we need
correct?
to have the subcommittee approved, it's basically a question of he has to sign the final decision.
Okay.
I still need to find out how the actual, yeah, there's some things I still need to iron out there. Especially around a fee, because I think he will actually need to negotiate the, well, we're not negotiating a fee, right? We decided we're setting a fee. Okay, so ignore what I just said.
I've forgotten whatever page number this was, but the one that starts selection process.
There's RFSs in, it refers to this RFS, so you might want to do a find for RSF.
Yeah.
For RFS.
The MSBA calls it an RFS, but Chapter 7C is quite specific that it's an RFQ.
So, yeah, so I think it might be in a couple places to just do a find for that. And then down at the bottom of that page, you talk about the design team and who will be responsible for the work with their name and whatnot. And then in the middle of the next page, that's repeated, so I just want to choose the location.
It is a negotiated fee, something else.
Oh, so we did, okay, so we'll still need to figure out how we're doing that. Thank you.
Comments, questions on these pages?
Under the evaluation criteria, I think it would be easier to read it if stuff was forwarded, but, I mean, I don't know how far you're into the formatting aspect, but yeah.
The problem with formatting right now is we're working in
Exactly.
Google Docs,
You're
but
doing both,
to
yeah.
export it, I'm putting it,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm basically not worrying about formatting at all.
Okay, fine.
It's a good point. Under evaluation criteria, the first paragraph currently says each of the following criteria will be evaluated and rated as highly advantageous, non-advantageous, and unacceptable. That was an early possibility that's still lying around, but I think we had started to move towards the idea that we weren't going to necessarily bind ourselves to ranking them that way. That's more of a 30B business services way, and this would be more of just a vote. And is that the consensus right now, is to not give ourselves a grading rubric?
I'm okay personally moving away from that.
What are the advantages and disadvantages for us?
The advantages is a simplified process. Every evaluator would have these criteria, and they'd say highly advantageous for each, and they come up with a composite, and then the recommendation would be based on everyone's composite rating. Not a great deal of need for discussion. The disadvantage is if it's flexible. The advantage is basically to not doing it is flexibility. Basically, you decide in hearing the presentations that there were items that you hadn't foreseen, or our criteria for what qualifies as highly advantageous were lacking, or didn't anticipate something, then we're stuck. We can't consider those things. So,
Can we not put it in there, but still use that kind of process as a way for our subcommittee to at least initially evaluate people? Or do you have to disclose it if you're going to use anything like that?
I think we tend towards disclosing. Yeah, I mean, so.
I just don't want it to be the final thing, but I think it would be a helpful way for us to.
7C is surprisingly silent on how the evaluation needs to take place. It just mostly specifies that you need to come to a ranked list of finalists. And that gives us flexibility. If we were going to come up with a rubric, I'd like to have it outlined. Only because trying to come up with it after the fact is ugly, and just from a coordinating perspective, and also in the interest of fairness.
Can you say there's this rubric, we're going to use it, but we have the right to overrule ourselves?
You can say it. I worry about about how the Inspector General would think of that.
So the intent of this was to apply that categorization to each of the sort of sub-parts of what we're looking at. Another way to do it is just to simply, for each subcommittee member, to kind of rank their preference for each individual designer. So it's kind of like, this is my, I think this designer, has the highest, hits the highest marks. I don't know, I think that in some ways that's more flexible. Then you can still compare it. Okay, this one, person A says 1, 2, 3, person B says 3, 4, 5,
That's a good point, because one version of this, and it's not here anymore, did have under certain of the criteria on the next page, under experience, highly advantageous, 7 to 10 years, advantageous, 5 to 7, and everyone, and in that scheme, you really need to select 5 criteria that you think will be important, and say how you're going to rank them. Whereas ditching it, we would probably do something more like what Jonathan outlines, where everyone would rank and you kind of add up the rankings.
I think
Weight the
that's what the
categories
DSP
too.
does, a version of that.
You would, under neither scheme is it really recommended that you would weight them mathematically. You can. We can come up with Jim, I know, has experience in coming up with a formula like that, and that we used to do it at the state, but under 7C, it's not really encouraged.
Okay. My question is, the way one person would rank might be different from the other one, and whether all the categories have the same weight. So I see the advantage of having a grid, but with different grades, different weights for each item.
Well, I was just gonna say that I agree with what Anthony was saying about how if we put it in here, that it binds us to, and I've definitely been in situations where we've had to make a selection because of, just the way the ratings came out. And I wouldn't like us to be in that situation. However, I've also worked where we've had a selection process where we used a grid just to help inform our decision-making, and it's been a weighted grid, but it didn't mean that whatever got the highest score we went with. It just helped us kind of put everything out there and then discuss the finals. So, but, so I don't know enough about the state laws, to know whether that would be wrong not to include it, but I think it's just the way you're gonna come to your decision internally. I don't see how that could be.
And this is really a two-tier thing we're doing too. We're gonna get a whole bunch of applicants and we're gonna whittle those down to a select few that we're still gonna interview too.
Yeah, you'll select finalists, and then we will interview them, and then we will rank the finalists.
So I find that if I rank differently than you rank, and each of us, as long as we're consistent within our ranking process, it pans out in the end. And I'm with you, if we give 20 people, it's better to have a grid and kind of filter through it and knock out the ones.
Yeah.
It keeps my brain organized.
Yeah, I don't really care if there's a number system or a weighting, but to me, when we're evaluating proposals, I would at least like a grid that references the different criteria and, what a better phrasing it, requires all the reviewers to actually go through the process of writing down their observations and their justifications for why they think one bidder is better than another. And then to me, again, it's like what you said a moment ago, or both said, I just want to make sure to me, I feel strongly we need to have some sort of process like that, especially because however the subcommittee or the committee of the whole is established, it's a broad enough group that we need to have some sort of rational basis for having even conversation. Like, in other words, if we don't have any of that, and we're literally going to sit down and just talk about what we think, like in a vague way. I mean, I'm not sure
That's a recipe for problems.
Like, I don't know about problems. It's a
Yeah,
recipe for like a
yeah.
24-hour, evaluation process, right?
Yeah.
It'll take us hours to sort through. Ideally, if at least we have some sort of grid reference point, even if we're not numbering and weighting off of that, I'm happier.
Well, it
Yeah.
makes people do their homework before they're.
Right.
I mean, we are required to list what we're going to be evaluating them on, even if we're not saying, we are required to say we're going to evaluate you on your experience. And and I was going to say experience because it's an easy one to talk about. We're not required to say you will get full points if you have 10 years of experience, and it's unacceptable if you have less than 3, although we may want to say it's unacceptable if you have less than 3. But at a minimum, we will be required to say we are going to consider your experience, your green design experience, your bandwidth to take on this project, your financial stability. We will have to say that and consider that.
But I just mean there's sort of an.
So you would.
It's all here.
Right.
All what you're saying.
No, all that's right there. I just mean that means though that for someone who's actually sitting on the committee going through the process, there's at least going to be an implicit sense in which they are creating some sort of evaluative criteria by which one firm is deemed to be more highly advantageous or less advantageous or unacceptable based on their reading through a very specific criteria, right?
So, are we taking this out, the rating?
Well, I think that nobody seems to want exactly this format of highly advantageous. I think that is going out.
Some sort of ranking process.
So each of the following criteria will be evaluated by the selection board, period.
Yeah, and then we just come up with the way that we evaluate it, and we'll base it on the evaluation criteria.
No, I just mean the word board is there again.
Yeah, it's become a subcommittee, yeah.
I have a question. Here we are not talking about the interviews, so it says the selection criteria, do we have to put that we're going to make a short list and those who get invited for interviews?
It's in
That's
here.
the selection
Is it?
process.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Let me
it's
see.
above.
Yeah, it's in
Okay,
the
sure.
third
Okay.
paragraph.
Third paragraph
Okay.
on the page.
Sorry, let me see.
Other comments, questions?
You guys are going to put it in there again, if we're not going to pursue that.
Yeah.
I guess we don't really need a specification consultant either.
Well, wasn't this list a case of just saying that this list was not a requirement that they have all these, but if they're going to
If they
have
had
them, we want
one.
it named?
Yeah.
So, is that, do we still want to have from here?
Given that we only have $150,000 to work with, I'm sure they're not gonna carry, well, we might say instead of environmental permitting is environmental consultant. That's it, we wanna know the answer to that.
Environmental assessment.
Assessment, yeah, consultant. That's, definitely, they don't need a specification consultant, we don't want them to pay.
Or the hazardous materials.
Yeah, because we're paying for that
Yeah.
separately.
What's this specifications consultant?
That's what we do.
Yeah.
With the drawings usually comes a book that describes all the acceptable
Okay.
materials and
Okay.
performances.
Books.
How you estimate a project, you put them on a scale.
Yeah.
Well, so do we want to start that sentence with something that's more like identify, because we're not necessarily expecting them to have a security consultant, so are we going to say including this, for example, or, some
Yeah.
way to qualify it, so they don't think they have to name someone for all of them?
For those included, identify.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because under double star NB, it says applicants must address each category of work listed above.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yes.
Sorry, strike the NB. Applicants must address each category of work listed above in the application, whether it is to be performed by in-house or by sub-consultants. So the crux of that is the last.
Well, that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
Or at all.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Identify in-house and sub-consultants.
Yeah.
I'm not the people.
Applicants must identify for any category of work listed above, whether it is to be performed.
Applicant must address work to be completed in-house or by sub-consultant.
Basically tell us who's doing what.
Does the standard designer application have that built in?
And it should, yes. There certainly are, there's a part for each. If you're not doing it yourself, you have to identify, actually, there's a nice little organizational chart that tells you who's on your team, what roles they're filling. And so in some ways, we can maybe default it back to that.
Are we required this one?
Ooh. That's an excellent point. That's a good question. I don't know what the rules are about going on.
We're almost done.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, whoever's
I was gonna
I
say,
don't-
Twitter,
I was
you
gonna
never
say
read
that.
that.
I don't think you're-
Other committees I've been on, just we
I
kind
don't
of
think
go
you're,
and go
I
and
don't
go.
think you're not required
Yeah.
to stop.
Okay, just check.
I think the
Okay.
difference.
I have to send
is-
apologies, though. I actually have an 8 o'clock meeting to get to, so. See you guys
Doesn't
next
mean
time.
individuals amongst us. don't.
Yep,
I know-
sorry, excuse me, please.
Nobody's monitoring that camera, is it okay? We
can.
hope.
It's running, I assume.
Okay.
It is. I will be turning it off.
Okay.
Maybe in a certain.
It'd be actually a bigger problem for the person who's doing the minutes, or
Yeah.
for us as a committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, other comments?
On that page on C where it says design excellence in past projects, I would say of similar size and scope. But
If I can object to the line altogether, because we got a bunch of criteria here. I like the subcategories, so we can use it for guidance, but we'll be the judge of their design excellence in A.
So
Maybe
design
strike.
excellence at A, is that?
we'll look at A.
And we will determine whether they have design.
Yeah, experience of the applicant's firm.
Right.
They're gonna result.
The intent of this C was for us to have a little subjectivity in what design excellence was. Because you could do all of these things really well and still have a very ugly building. So I think we were
Sure.
aiming more towards, the art of architecture.
And you're gonna rank that.
I'm gonna rank it really high.
I was thinking a manner, but,
Yeah.
okay.
By the portfolio evaluation. I mean, do you
Yeah,
wanna
or
kind of-
awards won, or, recognition by other, bodies
That's
of
actually a fun-
outstanding work.
I kind of assumed when it said design excellence, that was going to be judged by, have you won any awards for this stuff? Have you been cited as having a
Yeah.
noteworthy bill? Like, in other words, I didn't assume it was
Like
purely
publication.
subjective, like they're just saying,
Yeah.
oh, we're really excellent, trust
Yeah.
us. You know?
Do we know that?
No, it was the interpretation of the subcommittee kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does it make sense to add something of similar size and scope, or would you rather just look at the whole?
Similar size and scope.
Yeah. We don't want to see just $200 million
Yeah,
multi-story Boston area
yeah.
buildings. Yeah.
I
Or you don't
I
think so?
don't know, I mean, is there a reason you can't consider design excellence in doing a Cadillac school, or there design excellence in doing a small-town schoolhouse? Is there a reason you don't want to consider those things?
So if you have an unlimited budget, you can do really cool things,
Yeah.
but it's harder to do it with a lesser budget. That's the trick.
Yeah, we want to see someone who's crafty about working with the budget.
Exactly.
We don't know what our budget is.
Yeah, that's true.
But no matter what you want somebody that would do that. And we actually, I don't know that we address frugality and cleverness within a budget in our criteria.
No,
Yeah.
it's only mentioned on section 1.
At one point, there was criteria about staying on budget in the past, we might have lost that.
I think it should be there.
It should be, yeah, I would agree.
Working toward budget.
I think that's AF.
Yeah.
The question is, for that, how do we evaluate? They're going to tell us how much they spend, how much they had the original budget, and how much they spend in other projects that they have.
So on C, should it be recognized design excellence? And you can, qualify recognized as how it's
Okay.
Similar size?
Whenever you submit qualifications, you always try to tailor it to the
Yeah.
project. if you
Yeah.
do it, or just
Okay.
implicitly, but,
That's a good point. If someone comes in and shows you DPW buildings,
Right.
Yeah.
we can let them fail.
You learn something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not reading their audience, so maybe we don't need to guide them.
And it's part of crafting, I mean, not necessarily for the ones we read out early, but figuring the short list down, is seeing the quality of the presentation they make to us, because that will reflect on the quality of the presentation they write in the report. It's gotta be readable and look good and be quality work.
So, I suggested that I'm fine letting go of it, but unless someone else has a strong feeling about it. And then just the similar size and scope question.
I can go either way. I think it's fine as it is, but.
If they've won something for anything, they're going to tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna, so it doesn't matter, yeah.
That would be
okay.
true.
It's not like you're going to be shocked.
Yeah.
Can I ask that we maybe add something back that we took out and that I noticed in the Arlington, and that's the geographical proximity of the firm to the project site or willingness of the firm to make site visits and attend local meetings as required by the client. That was in the Arlington, and I think there's probably some value in that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, at 150,000, I mean, it can't be the only criteria, but we're going to get more service out of someone who's within 30 miles than we are someone who's on the far side of 1.8. I think it's a reasonable thing to consider amongst others.
No one's going to know for a fact. Do we have an idea of how many zero-energy qualified designers are within 30 miles?
You'd be surprised.
I probably would be, because I don't
Yeah.
know, but.
And we're not saying they have to be within 30 miles, we're just simply saying they have to be willing to show up, right?
It just says proximity or willingness to make site visits.
Right, exactly.
And not, say, and by the way, of that $150,000, half of that's going to be us traveling from Ohio.
Right.
So they have to factor it into their bid, whether it's, they're going to be able to do that. It's reasonable. Right, exactly. I like the way you're holding the line on this.
Not paying for their lunch on the flight.
Yeah.
Nope. So I would agree that I would bring that back in. Other comments, questions, additions, suggestions?
So I think at this point, the task force needs to meet again to hash out some of the things that still need to do here. Next time, it would be really good to get part one locked down, part three closer. I think I should also probably send you guys some of the attachments that are going to be included, especially the contract. I would love to have it on our agenda to evaluate the town's standard designer contract. We shouldn't have any changes there, but you guys should know what's in it. And if you do have changes to make, we need to probably get that by council.
Do we want to focus our next meeting on just one of the two parts? Or do you think we can get through enough? I mean, I can go either way, I'm just kind of curious.
We spent over an hour on what's here.
Yeah.
So we also now have a deadline in that
Yes.
we need to have it published in time to get people here for middle of May.
So we should do both parts.
Okay, try to get through both parts.
Can I make a comment before we go on
Yes, yes,
on part two? We don't have it printed.
Yeah.
In the fee proposals, it wasn't clear at the end. The fee must be based on the contractual terms of the contract for designer services included as attachment B. Also include hourly billing rates to be used in invoicing of optional additional services. Rates for each job classification listed below and any other application. And then it says, shall be comparable to those listed above. So
Okay, we might have lost something in the cutting and pasting.
it says billing rates for consultants shall be comparable to those listed above. We are not listed with rates, so we have to.
They have to, what we're asking them to do is tell us by hour how much they would charge us for the principal, the project architect, the project manager, so on.
Okay.
And then their subconsultants, like their landscape architect, their mechanical engineer, we're not paying them more than we're paying them.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify that
This may seem like a dumb question, but some places I've worked, you're not allowed to touch the contract. Like it was with, basically lawyers will all kill you if you try to screw with the contract. So I just wondered, I love the idea of you sharing the attachments of the committee so there are no surprises. But if you have any guidance as to the feasibility that you're actually, there's sort of two things we could do. One is you could be illuminating us as to what's included in the standard contract, which sounds like one reasonable task. The other one, you could be actually asking for advice as to how you'd like the contract to be revised, if at all. And I'm just looking for your guidance as to whether door number 2 is even on the table. Because I don't want to waste people's time looking through a contract and the edits that our town attorney is going to say, why are people going through the standard contract?
Yeah.
They're not doing that.
It would definitely not be my expectation that anyone would anyone would come to this with significant edits to the standard contract. Mostly I want people to know what's in it. But if you catch something like, maybe there's some liability language that you think is overly burdensome on this, or maybe you think there's something like, these contracts are boilerplate, and this one I think is also a little bit old, so I just kind of want to get a lot of eyeballs on it, make sure that nothing's going to surprise us. Easier to make the changes now than later.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second. All in favor? Go home and have dinner.
So we need to schedule the next meeting, we
Yes.
don't have a.
Yeah.
I need to have Deb send out a doodle poll for another couple.